Imam Hussain, a.s., the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, pbuh, was born in 626 CE in the city of Medina, during a time of profound spiritual and political turmoil. His birth was a beacon of hope and light, heralding the arrival of a child who would later become the central figure in one of the most significant events in Islamic history, the tragedy of Karbala. The story of Imam Hussain, a.s., is not just one of sacrifice and martyrdom, it is a story that encapsulates the ideals of justice, integrity, and unwavering devotion to truth, all of which resonate deeply within the Shia Islamic tradition. Imam Hussain, a.s., was born to Imam Ali, a.s., and Lady Fatima, a.s., the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, pbuh. His lineage was one of the most noble in Islam, tracing back to the Prophet himself, and he was raised in an environment that exemplified piety, virtue, and knowledge. Imam Hussein's early years were filled with the love and teachings of his parents, who themselves were paragons of Islamic values. As a young child, Imam Hussain, a.s., witnessed the teachings of his grandfather, the Prophet Muhammad, pbuh, who showered his family with love and affection. His bond with his brother, Imam Hassan, a.s., was also one of deep camaraderie and mutual respect. The two brothers were inseparable, and together they would go on to shape the course of Islamic history in a way that would inspire generations to come. The death of the Prophet Muhammad, pbuh, in 632 CE marked a significant turning point for the Muslim community. After the Prophet's passing, the question of leadership became one of the most divisive issues within the Muslim Ummah. Imam Ali, a.s., the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet, was widely recognized by the Prophet himself as his rightful successor. However, political forces within the early Muslim community led to the eventual establishment of the Caliphate under Abu Bakr, sidelining Imam Ali, a.s., from the leadership role. This division over leadership would later become a critical factor in the life of Imam Hussain, a.s. As a member of the Ahl-e-Bait, the family of the Prophet, Imam Hussain, as, grew up under the shadow of this political division. He was not only aware of the injustice that had been done to his father but also deeply troubled by the way the Muslim community was drifting away from the principles of justice and equity that the Prophet Muhammad, pbuh, had taught. During the period of Imam Ali's, a.s., caliphate, Imam Hussain, as, played a significant role in supporting his father's efforts to uphold justice. Imam Ali, a.s., faced considerable opposition from the forces of Muawiyah, the governor of Syria, who had ambitions of becoming the ruler of the Muslim world. Despite the challenges, Imam Ali, a.s., remained steadfast in his commitment to justice, and Imam Hussain, a.s., was by his side, providing unwavering support. The Battle of Siffin, fought in 657 CE, was a pivotal moment during Imam Ali's, a.s., caliphate. Imam Hussain, a.s., fought bravely alongside his father and the Muslim forces against the army of Muawiyah. Though the battle ultimately ended in a stalemate, it revealed the growing rift within the Muslim community and the deepening divide over the true leadership of Islam. Imam Hussain, as, could see firsthand the challenges his father faced, and these experiences would shape his own understanding of justice and leadership. After the martyrdom of Imam Ali, a.s., in 661 CE, the caliphate was passed on to his eldest son, Imam Hassan, a.s., despite his rightful position as the leader of the Muslim Ummah, was forced to make a peace agreement with Muawiyah to prevent further bloodshed. Imam Hassan's, a.s., decision to step down from the caliphate was a strategic one, aimed at preserving the unity of the Muslim community. However, Muawiyah's rise to power ushered in a new era of political oppression and corruption. Muawiyah, who had gained control of the caliphate, attempted to consolidate his power by imposing a hereditary monarchy, a system that was entirely foreign to the principles of Islamic governance as outlined by the Prophet Muhammad, pbuh. His rule was marked by tyranny and injustice, and his son, Yazid, was groomed to succeed him as caliph. As the years passed, the Muslim Ummah became more divided, and the moral decay within the leadership became more apparent. The corrupt leadership of Yazid became increasingly intolerable for Imam Hussain, a.s., who had witnessed firsthand the downfall of the values his grandfather had instilled in the community. In 680 CE, after Muawiyah's death, Yazid ascended to the throne. His rule was not based on the principles of justice and piety that Islam demanded. Yazid's lifestyle, filled with extravagance and moral corruption, was a stark contrast to the life of simplicity and devotion that Imam Hussain, a.s., represented. Imam Hussain, a.s., as the rightful heir to the leadership of the Muslim Ummah, could not accept Yazid's rule. Yazid's demand for allegiance was not just a political gesture but a violation of the very core principles of Islam. Imam Hussain, as, knew that to pledge allegiance to Yazid would be to compromise the integrity of Islam itself. It was not a decision made lightly, but one that was rooted in his unwavering commitment to the truth. Imam Hussain, as, sent letters to the people of Kufa, a city that had long been a stronghold of support for the Ahl-e-Bait. In these letters, he called upon the people of Kufa to rise against the oppressive rule of Yazid and to stand for justice. Imam Hussain, as, knew that this was a fight not just for political power, but for the soul of Islam itself. Imam Hussain, a.s., set out for Kufa, with a small group of his family and companions, not to seek power but to resist tyranny. He was not seeking conflict, but rather standing firm in his commitment to the divine principles of justice. On the way to Kufa, Imam Hussain, as, received news that the people of Kufa had been intimidated by Yazid's forces and that their support had waned. Despite this, Imam Hussain, a.s., pressed on, understanding that his mission was larger than any political game. It was a divine mission to restore the purity of Islam. The journey to Karbala, where Imam Hussain, a.s., would eventually be martyred, was one marked by profound sacrifice and steadfast faith. Imam Hussain, a.s., was not only fighting for his own survival but for the survival of the message of the Prophet Muhammad, pbuh. His refusal to pledge allegiance to Yazid was not an act of rebellion for the sake of rebellion, it was a stand for the truth, a stand for justice, and a stand for the preservation of the principles of Islam. Imam Hussain, as, did not seek martyrdom. He sought to ensure that the principles of justice, truth, and righteousness would remain alive in the hearts of Muslims for all time. His journey from Medina to Karbala is a testament to the purity of his character and his unwavering commitment to the values of Islam. The tragedy of Karbala was not just an event, it was the birth of a movement that continues to inspire and shape the hearts of millions of people around the world. As we look at the early life of Imam Hussain, a.s., we are reminded of the importance of standing up for what is right, no matter the cost. Imam Hussein's, as, life teaches us that true leadership is not about power, but about serving humanity with integrity, justice, and faith. Imam Hussain, a.s., had long been aware of the political and spiritual decay that had gripped the Muslim world following the death of his grandfather, the Prophet Muhammad, pbuh. Yet, it was not until the caliphate of Yazid ibn Muawiyah that the situation became unbearable. Yazid's rule threatened the very essence of Islam, and Imam Hussain, as, knew that something had to be done. This part of Imam Hussein's, as, journey marks a critical turning point, where his commitment to justice and righteousness would lead him to the battlefield of Karbala, to stand against tyranny and oppression, no matter the cost. Imam Hussein's, a.s., decision to refuse allegiance to Yazid was not one made in haste. It was a decision that was rooted in his deep understanding of the principles of Islam, which emphasized justice, truth, and the welfare of the people over personal gain. Yazid, a ruler whose actions were in direct contradiction to the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, pbuh, sought to force Imam Hussain, as, into allegiance. His oppressive rule was not only a political crisis but a direct assault on the moral and spiritual fabric of the Islamic. A direct assault on the moral and spiritual fabric of the Islamic. As Imam Hussain, a.s., and his companions continued their journey, they reached the banks of the Euphrates River, where they camped for the night. The vast desert stretched before them, and the sound of the wind carried with it a sense of foreboding. Imam Hussain, as, knew that Karbala was not far off, and that the moment of truth was fast approaching. The small caravan, filled with his closest family and friends, would soon face the full might of Yazid's army. On the 2nd of Muharram in 680 CE, Imam Hussain, a.s., and his companions arrived in the plains of Karbala, a desolate stretch of land that would soon become the stage for one of the most tragic and significant events in Islamic history. Upon arrival, Imam Hussain, A.S., saw that Yazid's army had already set up camp on the other side of the river. It was here, in this barren landscape, that Imam Hussain, A.S., and his companions would make their stand. Imam Hussain, as, knew that the battle was inevitable. He did not seek war, but he knew that the fight for justice could not be avoided. Imam Hussain, as, sent a message to Yazid's forces, offering them a peaceful resolution. He proposed that they allow him and his companions to return to Medina or even to go to a distant land where they could live in peace. But Yazid's forces, led by Umar ibn Sa'ad, rejected Imam Hussein's, A.S., peaceful overtures. Instead, they demanded that Imam Hussain, A.S., pledge allegiance to Yazid. The refusal of Imam Hussain, A.S., was a defiant rejection of the tyranny and corruption that Yazid represented. Imam Hussain, as, knew that his refusal to give allegiance was not just a political act, it was an act of spiritual resistance. His stance was one of moral courage and faith in God's divine justice. Imam Hussain, A.S., said, "I will never submit to a tyrant. I will never pledge allegiance to someone who desecrates the teachings of my grandfather, the Prophet Muhammad, PBUH." As the days passed, Imam Hussain, A.S., and his companions were encircled by Yazid's army. They were denied access to water, and the scorching heat of the desert took its toll. Despite this, the resolve of Imam Hussain, A.S., and his companions remained unshaken. Each day, the companions of Imam Hussain, A.S., demonstrated their unwavering loyalty and devotion to the cause. One by one, they volunteered to fight in the defense of their Imam, knowing that death awaited them, but their sacrifices were motivated by the belief in the ultimate triumph of truth. Among the companions was a young boy named Ali-Asghar, A.S., the son of Imam Hussain, A.S., who had not yet reached the age of maturity. His death on the battlefield would become one of the most heart-wrenching moments of Karbala, symbolizing the innocence that was martyred in the pursuit of justice. As the day of the battle drew near, Imam Hussain, A.S., stood with his companions, preparing for what would be the ultimate test of faith, loyalty, and sacrifice. His stand at Karbala was not one of desperation, but one of hope, a hope that future generations would understand the importance of standing up for justice, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The plains of Karbala became the stage for one of the most poignant and heart-wrenching battles in Islamic history. It was here that Imam Hussain, A.S., the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, made the ultimate stand for truth, justice, and righteousness, against the tyrannical forces of Yazid. The events of Ashura, the 10th of Muharram in the year 680 CE, would become the defining moment of Imam Hussein's, A.S., life and the lives of those who stood with him. It was a day that witnessed unparalleled acts of courage, sacrifice, and devotion to faith, but it was also a day filled with grief, as the voices of the righteous were silenced in the most brutal way. Imam Hussein's, as, stand at Karbala would go down in history not just as a moment of martyrdom, but as the ultimate triumph of moral courage over the forces of oppression. The martyrdom of Imam Hussain, A.S., and his companions serves as an eternal reminder of the values of justice, truth, and the sanctity of faith. On the morning of Ashura, Imam Hussain, A.S., and his companions stood on the banks of the Euphrates River, facing the approaching forces of Yazid. They had endured days of hardship in the scorching heat, deprived of water, and surrounded by the enemy. The thirst had taken its toll, especially on the children, and yet the faith of Imam Hussain, A.S., and his companions remained unshaken. Each member of the Imam's camp, from the elderly to the children, exhibited an unwavering commitment to the cause of truth, knowing that they were about to face certain death. As the sun rose on the 10th of Muharram, the atmosphere in Karbala was charged with an air of inevitability. Imam Hussain, A.S., gathered his companions and family for one final meeting. His words echoed in the hearts of those present, reminding them of the mission for which they had come. Imam Hussain, as, addressed them with a sense of calm determination. "Today, we are not just fighting for our lives, but for the survival of Islam, for the truth that the Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, brought to the world. We stand here not for power, nor for fame, but for the preservation of the values that our Prophet held dear: justice, compassion, and righteousness. If we must die today, we will die with honor, knowing that we have upheld the truth. These words reverberated through the hearts of his companions, and they responded with fervor, pledging their lives to him and to the cause of Islam. Among them were the steadfast warriors who had followed Imam Hussain, a.s., from the beginning, all of whom were prepared to lay down their lives in defense of truth. The battle began early in the day, as Imam Hussein's, a.s., companions were called upon to fight. Finally, Imam Hussain, a.s., himself entered the battlefield, determined to face Yazid's forces with the same courage and integrity that he had shown throughout his journey. He called upon the enemies, asking them to let him speak, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of battle. His family and companions had already been martyred, and the world seemed to stand against him. Imam Hussain, a.s., fought valiantly, but he was surrounded. He was struck with numerous arrows and blows, and his body began to weaken. As he fell to the ground, he called out, "Is there anyone to help me? Is there anyone to defend the family of the Prophet?" At that moment, Imam Hussain, a.s., fell to the earth, and the heavens wept with him. His martyrdom was not the end, but the beginning of a movement that would inspire millions to stand against tyranny and oppression. Imam Hussain, a.s., died, not in pursuit of power, but in pursuit of the truth and the preservation of Islam. The tragedy of Karbala did not end with the martyrdom of Imam Hussain, a.s. The women and children of the Ahl-e-Bait, including his sister Zainab, a.s., were taken captive by Yazid's forces. They were paraded through the streets, mocked and humiliated. Yet, Zainab, a.s., and the other women showed immense strength and resilience, standing firm in their faith and in the legacy of their brother, father, and son. The women and children were eventually taken to the court of Yazid in Damascus, where they stood as symbols of resistance to tyranny. Despite the immense pain they had endured, they did not lose their faith. Zainab, a.s., in particular, became the voice of Imam Hussain, a.s., speaking out against the injustices of Yazid's rule. The tragedy of Karbala became a turning point in Islamic history. It was not merely a battle for survival but a battle for the soul of Islam. The martyrdom of Imam Hussain, a.s., and his companions became a symbol of resistance to oppression, inspiring generations to come. The day of Ashura was a day like no other in history, a day of sacrifice, a day of pain, but also a day of unparalleled courage. Imam Hussain, a.s., and his companions gave everything in the name of justice, truth, and the preservation of the message of the Prophet Muhammad, PBUH. Their sacrifices, their courage, and their unwavering commitment to the cause of righteousness would echo throughout history, teaching the world that the struggle for justice is never in vain, no matter the odds. The tragedy of Karbala, though it took place on a single day in the year 680 CE, resonates through the ages as a timeless symbol of resistance against oppression, the pursuit of justice, and unwavering faith in God. The martyrdom of Imam Hussain, a.s., his family, and his companions was not just a moment of deep sorrow, it was a monumental event that would shape the course of history and inspire countless generations to come. The story of Karbala transcends the political and social circumstances of its time. It has become a beacon of hope, a moral compass, and a source of spiritual strength for millions of Muslims around the world. To understand the true legacy of Imam Hussain, a.s., one must look beyond the battle itself and explore how his sacrifice continues to echo in the hearts and minds of people, and how the lessons of Karbala remain relevant in today's world. After the brutal martyrdom of Imam Hussain, a.s., and his companions, the tragedy of Karbala did not end with the bloodshed on the battlefield. The surviving members of the Ahl-e-Bait, Imam Hussein's, a.s., sisters, his young children, and the other women and family members, were taken captive by Yazid's army. Their ordeal, though a continuation of their suffering, would become a defining part of the tragedy that symbolized the relentless spirit of resistance. Zainab, a.s., the sister of Imam Hussain, a.s., emerged as the leader of the women and children after the battle. She became the voice of Imam Hussein's mission, speaking out against the injustice that had befallen their family. Zainab was not only a sister in grief but a powerful figure who would forever be remembered for her courage, eloquence, and unwavering faith. Her speeches in the court of Yazid in Damascus and later in Kufa revealed her strength and commitment to the cause of her brother. In the face of the harshest oppression, she stood tall, reminding the world that the Battle of Karbala was not just about the martyrdom of a few individuals, but about the preservation of justice, truth, and the Islamic faith. Zainab's words in the court of Yazid were a powerful declaration of the immorality of his rule and a direct challenge to the tyrant who thought he could suppress the message of Islam through violence. In front of the tyrant's court, Zainab declared, "Do you think that by killing my brother, you have silenced the message of truth? Do you think that by capturing us, you have extinguished the light of Islam? The blood of Hussein, will continue to speak long after his martyrdom." Zainab, along with the other captives, endured the humiliation of being paraded through the streets, but their resolve remained firm. Their captivity became a powerful testament to the resilience of the Ahl-e-Bait and the truth that Imam Hussain, had died to protect. After several months of captivity, the survivors of Karbala were eventually released and allowed to return to Medina. This was not a return in triumph but a return marked by grief and loss. Imam Hussein's family returned not as victors but as those who had borne witness to the ultimate sacrifice for justice. They returned to Medina, the city of the Prophet, with a message of unwavering faith, hope, and resistance. Upon their return, the people of Medina greeted them with sorrowful hearts, understanding that they had been forever changed by the horrors of Karbala. The family of Imam Hussain, did not return as ordinary people but as symbols of resilience, dignity, and moral courage. Their return marked the beginning of a new chapter in Islamic history, one that would continue to inspire future generations in their struggles against tyranny. The companions who had fought beside Imam Hussain, in Karbala, though they had been martyred on that fateful day, also left behind a legacy that would inspire others. Figures such as Abu al-Fadl Abbas, Ali Akbar, Ali Asghar, and the other martyrs of Karbala became heroes not only of their time but of every time. Their bravery and devotion to Imam Hussain, would become a model for anyone who sought to stand for justice, no matter the cost. The tragedy of Karbala is not just a historical event, it is a source of endless spiritual and moral lessons for Muslims and for people of all faiths who seek to understand the true meaning of justice, sacrifice, and moral courage. The lessons from Karbala are as relevant today as they were in 680 CE. At the heart of Imam Hussein's stand was the refusal to submit to oppression and tyranny. Imam Hussain, did not seek power, wealth, or personal glory. His stand was one of righteousness. He opposed Yazid because of his immoral actions and his abuse of power. Imam Hussain, knew that the survival of Islam depended on standing up against the forces of tyranny, even when the odds were stacked against him. In today's world, Imam Hussein's example continues to inspire people to stand against oppression in all its forms. Whether it is political, social, or economic injustice, the legacy of Imam Hussain, urges us to take a stand for the oppressed and to seek justice, no matter the cost. Imam Hussein's faith in God was unwavering. Even in the face of death, he did not lose hope in Allah's mercy and justice. His faith was not contingent on material success or worldly gains, it was rooted in his trust in God's will. Imam Hussain, knew that his mission was divinely ordained, and that by sacrificing his life for the truth, he would be fulfilling his spiritual duty. The strength of Imam Hussein's faith continues to inspire Muslims to cultivate a deep and unwavering relationship with Allah. In times of hardship and trial, the story of Imam Hussain, reminds us that true success lies not in worldly victories, but in fulfilling our divine purpose with faith and integrity. The loyalty of Imam Hussein's companions was one of the defining characteristics of the tragedy of Karbala. Each companion, from Abbas, A.S., to Ali Akbar, A.S., demonstrated unparalleled loyalty to their Imam and to the cause of Islam. They stood by Imam Hussain, A.S., in the face of death, knowing that their sacrifice would ensure the preservation of the truth. The example of loyalty and brotherhood shown by Imam Hussain, A.S., and his companions is a lesson for all of us in the value of loyalty to principles, to family, and to our faith. It teaches us that in times of trial, we must hold steadfast to those we love, to our values, and to the path of righteousness. Imam Hussain, A.S., died to preserve the truth. He did not fight to gain personal power, nor did he seek revenge against his enemies. His mission was solely to ensure that Islam remained pure and true to the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, Pbuh. His sacrifice became the ultimate act of defending the truth, even when the consequences were dire. The battle for truth and justice is ongoing, and the lessons of Karbala remind us that it is our responsibility to stand up for what is right, even when faced with great adversity. Imam Hussein's stand is a reminder that truth is not always easy, but it is always worth fighting for. The legacy of Imam Hussain, A.S., and the tragedy of Karbala have reached far beyond the boundaries of the Middle East and the Muslim world. His story has inspired countless individuals and movements throughout history. From the uprisings of the oppressed to the struggles for human rights and justice, the example of Imam Hussain, serves as a beacon for those fighting against tyranny in all its forms. The annual observance of Ashura, the day of Imam Hussein's, A.S., martyrdom, has become a global event, uniting millions of people around the world in mourning, remembrance, and reflection. It is not just a day of sorrow but a day of reflection on the core principles of Islam, justice, compassion, and the fight against oppression. Imam Hussein's, A.S., message transcends religious boundaries. His stand against tyranny, his unwavering faith, and his commitment to justice resonate with anyone who seeks to make a positive difference in the world. In a time when the world still faces injustice and inequality, the story of Karbala is more relevant than ever. Imam Hussain, A.S., continues to be a symbol of moral courage, inspiring individuals to stand for what is right, even when it means making the ultimate sacrifice. The sacrifice of Imam Hussain, A.S., at Karbala has had an indelible impact on Islamic history and the world at large. His martyrdom was not the end but the beginning of a movement that would inspire generations of Muslims and non-Muslims alike to stand for justice, truth, and righteousness. Imam Hussain, taught us that the struggle for justice is an eternal battle, and that no matter how difficult the path, the victory of truth will always endure. As we reflect on the life, death, and legacy of Imam Hussain, A.S., we are reminded of the timeless principles that he embodied: faith, loyalty, justice, and the courage to stand against oppression. Karbala is not just a historical event, it is a living legacy that continues to shape